All right, so the big question here is who is going to be the big Tesla killer? The great white elephant has a few new hunters, and we're going to break one of them down today. My name is Paul Barron. This is Tech Path. We're going to dive into kind of the issue of what Hyundai is doing with their IONIQ 5 today, and really kind of whether or not this is a potential for competing with either the Model 3 or the Model Y from Tesla. Here's the thing, when you look at what Hyundai is doing, especially around the charging component, and we will talk a little bit about the recent news about their recall, which is part of their old battery technology and where that's kind of going. But the big issue I want to talk about here is the new tech that Hyundai is rolling out. First is the 800 watt or 800 volt electrical architecture. Now, if you know, obviously you know this, Tesla is running on a 400 volt system, has been for quite some time. It's not that they are, from what I've heard from Elon's interviews in the past, that they would go away from it. It's just, it's the system that they built. There are some benefits to it, but eventually, because of the quick charging aspect of the 800 volt system, it does pose a great potential opportunity for automobiles that are moving in that direction. Obviously, the Porsche Taycan was the first to really kind of go in that direction. The challenge you have with all of these is the availability of the charging network, which is going to be a continued problem maybe for the next 2 or 3 years, depending on who adopts 800 volt quickest and whether or not they are starting to deploy charging systems. Because even with Porsche, they themselves are trying to put in charging systems, but to be able to compete with someone like a Tesla and their supercharger network, that is a long time coming. The hope is that maybe the EV company or the charging companies that are out there, like Blink and several others that are moving into potentially supplying systems like this for 800 volt would be the potential savior, because I don't necessarily see the automotive manufacturers moving very quickly on this. Tesla is kind of a little bit of a white elephant in that scenario, because there was nothing out there, so they had to create the network. Now we've got so many companies playing into this, it's a big deal. All right, so they have this smaller unit, which is 58 kilowatts per hour, and then the bigger unit, which is going to be 72 kilowatts per hour pack. Basically, the second one is going to provide up to around almost 300 miles in range and 302, I think, horsepower, and capable of accelerating from 0 to 60 in about 5.2 seconds. Now, this is still considerably slower than the Model 3 and the Model Y in the same price zone of the long range. The long range Model Y and Model 3, let's go with the Model 3, 4.2 seconds, priced at $46,000 currently today. So the pricing comparison with the IONIQ 5, when you look at the European numbers, which are the ones that have been released, it puts it around $67,000 for the all-wheel drive version, which would be the competitive scenario to maybe the 3 or the Y in the all-wheel drive. All-wheel drive in the Y, you're still hovering around $60K, depending on what kind of paint and trim and interior selection and of course, wheels. All of this is going to be very interesting, because now we're talking about a product that potentially has a better charging system, somewhat equal range. Pricing is within the neighborhood of where Tesla is from a major manufacturer, and we've got something that is, in reality, the styling cues and the look of this car. It's very handsome. It's got some great looks. I don't necessarily see it being that futuristic design. It's got a little bit more of that boxy, wider feel to it, almost like an Audi-esque design styling, which I think is a good selection, because you don't want to get caught in the rut of copying one vehicle into that. And Tesla has been one of those companies that has been able to kind of own that space in terms of their styling cues. So it's been a very interesting aspect. Now, one of the things that I think is going to draw in people to this car is the 18 minutes to charging up to 80% of the battery. That in itself is a pretty impressive scenario, and I do think that could be a major factor in getting this car off the ground in terms of sales. Now, it still boils down to where are you going to charge it in 18 minutes. If you're doing that at your home, then it really isn't a benefit. You've got to be able to do it out on some kind of charging system that is remote, in between cities, when time is of the essence. And I think that's going to be the really the killer question that Hyundai has to address to the buying public. Now, let's also talk about kind of this whole aspect of 800 watt versus 400 watt. There's a lot of, I will say there's some debate. There's some debate on this and what that topic is going to reflect in terms of whether or not Tesla takes the step into going in that direction. Obviously, they'd have to make physical changes at their supercharger network, and all the legacy Teslas would be still running on the 400 watt system or the 400 volt system. That in itself, I think, is going to be interesting because that's going to be a major shift for Tesla to make that kind of jump. Now, we are still potentially years away from getting to an 800 watt widely available charging network of any kind unless Tesla were to invest in it and open it up to basically all vehicles to charge at a Tesla. And they have started to do that in some cases. So there is some potential, I think, there that it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. As far as size, when you look at this particular car, it's a little bit bigger than the ID4, the VW. It has a lot of similarities to the Model 3 in terms of its capacity. It's got the, which I thought was really a cool feature, is this center console is kind of a sliding console, so you can use it with different kind of seat configurations. Obviously, the full recline gives it kind of that environment, almost like what Tesla and Model Y use for their camp modes when you drop those back seats. There's a lot of features here, I think, that are going to be very, very attractive. And then obviously Hyundai is eligible for the full $7,500 in federal EV tax credit. All of these things factored. You take price, you take the charging speed, you look at the styling cues, the availability, and then I think the charging network is going to be a problem for Hyundai unless they can solve it and really kind of get to that next level. But without that being an issue, if you're charging at home and range at 300 miles and you like the 0 to 60 speed, which is a little bit slower than the Tesla, then maybe this is the vehicle that can finally step up to the platform and be in the same conversation with where Tesla is going. Now, there is one aspect of this particular car that I think is huge, and that is the vehicle-to-grid capability. From what the reports are from Hyundai is this is going to have the potential to take the car and literally drop it into your grid, meaning if you want to use it to charge other things, that is a great opportunity. And if you think about, let's just look at some of the extreme weather scenarios that we've dealt with here in the United States. Here it is in February. Texas is basically an ice bowl. This kind of vehicle could have been maybe capable of, warming a certain portion of your house or maybe for a couple of days while your power's out. Same thing here in the hurricane seasons. Your car becomes a huge generator, especially if you're not running it out on the road. If you're just using it as a park device inside your garage, remember there's no combustion. This becomes a vehicle that can now power, potentially give you a little bit more cooling with air conditioning or heating in whatever scenario. So I think this vehicle-to-grid function is one that eventually will be a differentiator. Now, with that being said, you have to also think about what Elon has talked about when it comes to vehicle-to-grid charging and where that could potentially go. He has mentioned that it is possible and it's something that they are giving consideration to. If Tesla were able to go in and just through a software update make a Tesla go vehicle-to-grid, that completely advances that car up another notch in terms of its benefits to the marketplace. So that's going to be the big question when you look at all these manufacturers that are really kind of chasing Tesla right now on range, on charging speed, on styling, on availability, and on price. All of those things have to come into the discussion. And the more and more we see companies talking and releasing, some of their prototypes, it looks like it is coming, and Tesla is in a position where they are going to finally have to defend their championship when it comes to the EV marketplace, especially with the killer car, and that is the Model 3. We're going to continue to break this down and really kind of look at some of these contenders, all the way from Lucid to Neo and beyond, that potentially have an option to be able to start making a play at Tesla. Obviously, we've got the majors out there with GM and Ford, both having fairly consistent EV options with what they're doing. I want to talk about kind of the scenario of where the Mach-E is on an upcoming video. If you think we should bring up the Mach-E, the Ford, and maybe do a head-to-head comparison and really kind of look at the comparative analysis of where Ford could go versus where they are right now, because there's still a lot of scenarios there that I think have to come out for Ford to be able to compete with Tesla. And a lot of it, I think, is going to be in the marketing capacity. So if you like that idea, just drop it in the comments. Let us know what you think. Happy to do that, break down some of that information. And again, if you have a great idea for a show that you would like to see, just shoot us an email to producer@revernetworks.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.